June 1976. Sanrio Film was hard at work on their Greek mythic fantasia, The Metamorphoses. Susumu Aketagawa, sound director for the studio's Ringing Bell adaptation, had managed to secure a massive opportunity for Sanrio. His old boss was going to visit. Sanrio was about to launch its new girls magazine, Sanrio Lyrica, and the head of Sanrio, Shintaro Tsuji, wanted this man to write a comic for their new monthly book. One of the most prolific mangaka of all time, the man who redefined television animation, the god of comics himself, Osamu Tezuka. Sanrio flew Tezuka out to Los Angeles to tour the studio and received the pitch from his former subordinate, Aketagawa. The new Sanrio Lyrica was going to be revolutionary for the Japanese comics industry. It was going to be printed in a Western format, reading from left to right, and it would be completely in color. All of this was to appeal to a Western market. Sanrio was going worldwide. Tezuka was interested enough to visit the studio, but he wasn't sure he could write another work for young girls. His last one had been Princess Knight, a gender-bending romantic adventure about Princess Sapphire. Considered one of the precursors to the magical girl genre, as Sapphire switched between presenting as male or female based on the situation.
A girl who pretends she's a boy. It's been such a strain to keep this secret inside of our hearts. Princess. Ow!
But it had been a decade since Princess Knight, and Tezuka had been far more focused on his literary, transgressive, and experimental works. While touring the studio and looking at the production materials for Metamorphoses, inspiration struck. Tezuka quickly sketched a goofy little unicorn. This was the character that would bring Sanrio together with the great Osamu Tezuka. This was Unico. The first issue of Sanrio Lyrica hit Japanese store shelves in November 1976, including the full-color works of Moto Haigo, Hideko Mizuno, Osamu Tezuka, and more. A thick, full-colored magazine featuring chapters of manga from various genres ranging from dark fantasy to slice of life. Stuffed to the brim with Sanrio advertisements, horoscopes, and articles for all ages, Lyrica was brimming with art and information for anyone willing to open its pages. Sanrio Lyrica was a bold statement on the future of comics, but there was one problem. The American comic industry in the 1970s, and let's face it, until the turn of the millennium, was only focused on boys. Fred Patton, a comic artist brought on to help Sanrio with the art of the Metamorphoses, described the situation thusly.
American comic professionals got the increasing impression that the Sanrio executives were out of touch with the reality of the American comic book industry. The 100-plus page Lyrica could not be printed by any regular comics printer. It would have cost a lot more than the then standard 15 cents. It would presumably contain advertising for Sanrio's merchandise for girls, which would particularly turn away any boys who might otherwise buy it. Would it fit on the newsstands? Comic specialty shops were just beginning, along with other comic books. What would the regular newsstand distributors think of such an oddball comic book? The Sanrio executives casually dismissed all these concerns.
Sanrio Lyrica was never released in America. The fully colored issues were unsustainable on a monthly release schedule. Most of Tezuka's Unico chapters were split between 2 to 4 pieces across multiple issues, and by the summer of the next year, he would already be taking a hiatus. Admitted into Nippon Medical Hospital on August 15th due to an acute case of hepatitis. The chapters would no longer be in full color. They would be a tricolor combination of red, white, and black. Still a bit more exciting than the regular black and white, but a major downgrade from the beautiful watercolors of the original issues. These chapters would later be fully colored for the Unico collections, while also receiving minor edits to streamline the chapters. Lyrica would only last for 29 issues, ending publication after its 1979 issue featuring the final entry of Unico, Fangs of Athens. Unico appeared in a total of 20 of these 29 issues, even getting his own special Unico collection issue. Much like Sanrio's other ventures during this period, Lyrica was just too ambitious. The Japanese executives knew little to nothing about American taste, and the comics in Lyrica were insanely highbrow in comparison to the superhero comics on American shelves at the time. I can't help but wonder what kind of reality we could have had if Lyrica had been successful in the United States. Providing Americans with an introduction to the broad umbrella of shoujo works 2 decades before Sailor Moon would eventually pave the way for young girls and queer kids alike. I purchased a bundle of Lyrica magazines for research, and they're drop-dead gorgeous. I'm not sure any of these works, even the Moto Haigo piece, were translated into English besides Unico, and it seems that most of them have been forgotten to time. It's no wonder they were able to get Tezuka to sign on for this project. It was something risky, experimental, and exciting. But Tezuka wouldn't settle for just being part of the experiment. He would create a work full of care, melancholy, and passion. A story of a forlorn unicorn, blessed to bring joy to others and cursed to forget, to forever be alone, trapped in a Sisyphean tragedy where happy endings are perpetually out of reach. Unico opens with a prologue introducing Venus, the goddess of love, who has become obsessed with a mortal girl named Psyche. Psyche has drawn the eye of many, mortal and god alike, for her striking beauty and gentle nature. She has been blessed with the love of a unicorn, our titular Unico. Venus begins plotting against Psyche, having her son Eros try and shoot an arrow of love into Psyche to have her fall in love with a beggar. Unico sabotages this plan, and Eros is struck by his own arrows, causing him to fall madly in love with Psyche. Venus's next scheme is to steal Unico away during a grand tournament of pets. Tezuka has a lot of fun references in this section, including a nod to Winsor McKay's first animated picture, Gertie the Dinosaur. The commentator gives us a convenient explanation of a unicorn's powers, mimicry, telepathy, and transformation, but they are limited and can only be used to help or protect one that truly loves Unico. The fairy Papillon disguises herself as Psyche and kidnaps Unico for Venus. Without her unicorn, Psyche is surely to fall from grace. Venus summons the West Wind to take Unico through space and time to the Hill of Forgetfulness, a place where he will never be able to return. However, the West Wind takes pity on the cute creature. She instead erases his memory to prevent him from returning to his beloved and deposits him in a place and time away from Venus's watchful gaze.
Poor little one, I must steal you from your mother and take you to a place where you'll be forgotten forever.
And it was in this way that little Unico's long, long journey began.
Here in the dunes, close by the sea, Flep and Layla have made their home.
Buffalo Hill tells the tale of a native boy, Tippy, who finds an injured Unico and nurses him back to health. Unico blesses him with good fortune. The two explore together and stumble upon a white girl named Mary. Tippy and Mary fall madly in love, and Unico uses his powers to allow them temporary moments of adulthood. However, Unico can tell their love is destined to end tragically, and tries to warn the two to no avail. He is whisked away by the west wind yet again before he can help Tippy and Mary avoid their unfortunate end. From here on out, Unico is going to be an anthology, and Buffalo Hill is definitely one of the darker stories in said anthology. Unico's ability to bring happiness to those he cares for allows Tippy and Mary to fall in love, but one being a native and the other being white causes their love to be star-crossed. Most Unico endings have happy resolutions for the characters, but see Unico being denied his own happy ending. This is one of the rare occasions where the love he brings acts as a double-edged sword, dooming those he cares for most. Tezuka really came out swinging with the first full-length story, tackling the issue of race relations through a Romeo and Juliet style narrative. Many of these stories will be about romance, since they're published under the shoujo or girls comics umbrella, but it was quite daring of him to have the first one end in what is essentially a cliffhanger never meant to be resolved. It helps reinforce the sense of unease and despair that Unico feels every time he is swept away, forced to forget stories before they can reach their conclusions.
Five handsome pups have been born to my friend. 4 of the pups are male, 1 female. I wonder what names should be given these happy children.
The next entry in the Unico series was Rosaria the Beautiful, a tale of, you guessed it, the beautiful Princess Rosaria. The king has been cursed to look hideous, which scares off any possible suitors for the princess. The king hides his hideous face from the people and allows the corrupt Dandara to rule in his stead. Rosaria meets Unico and is blessed with her first friend. Unico also meets a dashing young minstrel, Lupinus, of Roseland. He's got a dark connection to the king and is out for revenge. All hell breaks loose when Dandara incites a coup, declaring Unico is a demon that has corrupted the king and princess. The west wind gives Unico 1 night before she must take him away again, and it is up to Unico to stop Dandara and save the kingdom. This is the most fantasy by numbers story in the collection. I assume Tezuka wanted to reel back in any young female audiences that he might have scared off with the previous arc about indigenous genocide. That being said, this story still has some wonderful Tezuka charm to entertain throughout. Unico gets to use his horn as a sword multiple times and even has a full-on sword fight with Dandara. He also has an ongoing bit where he pokes people in the butt with his horn. It's his go-to attack and it's adorable. There's a gorgeous dream sequence where the princess sees herself dancing ballet with the mysterious Lupinus, coming to the realization that she's in love. It's classic romantic shoujo, no insane Ryoko Ikeda melodrama here. That isn't to say it's a story that's all butterflies and rainbows though. There is a scene where Dandara sows distrust in Unico by having his henchmen mass murder random villagers with horn-shaped daggers, framing our little guy for these horrible acts. Besides that, this is definitely the most lighthearted of the Unico stories so far, a charming shoujo fairy tale with plenty of slapstick and a happy ending. Except for Unico.
This is the one pup who is starting life with a terrible handicap. He is blind, with only his ears and his sense of smell to help him discover the world outside.
Cat on the Broomstick is the third and probably the most well-known Unico story, since it is the primary source material for the movie as well as the first volume of Unico the Awakening, the American reimagining of Unico for modern audiences. Cat on the Broomstick follows the character named Chow, a small tuxedo kitty who dreams of becoming a human after being abandoned by her owners. With the help of Unico's magic, she meets a kindly old woman and is given the chance of being human for 1 hour at a time. At first, Chow uses this power to help the old lady, but after meeting the mysterious bear and ghost, her aspirations begin to change. So I'm not going to go into much detail on this story since it's the primary source for the first film as well as the first American comic released in 2024. Don't worry, you'll get to hear all about Chow. Wait, I mean Katie?
So if you ever need a magical cat, Katie's the kitty to call.
Hold on, she's Chloe now? Can we just decide on one name for the cat, please?
Katie, you really shouldn't be out here just doing nothing.
Oh! Why don't you mind your own business, you little snoop?
It's now May, and spring has finally and truly arrived. And see how much the pups have grown. It's high time I name each one. This one, the strongest of the litter, I shall name Lyrica. That means the... And finally, our little blind friend Chinita, the dream.
Unico. どこにも行かないで。ユニコはどこ？ユニコ！
Black Rain and White Feathers is the fourth entry of the Unico series. It was also the first piece of Unico media to get an adaptation. This entry sees Unico entering a modern city where a massive factory has polluted the sky, blocking out the sun. With the help of a rat named Garapachi, Unico meets a sickly young girl named Chico. It turns out that the factory is run by a sentient machine that fell in love with Chico upon first sight. The machine only began producing toxic black fog after being denied by Chico. This has caused her to develop a horrible illness. Unico uses his magic to introduce Chico to the Prince of the Fairies, who gifts her one of his magical feathers. When Chico is kidnapped by the sentient factory, will Unico and Garapachi be able to save her, or will Unico be prematurely swept away yet again? The first Unico short film was developed in-house at Sanrio Productions, using many of the staff members who worked on previous films such as Ringing Bell. The film was directed by Toshio Hirata, who had just gotten off another Sanrio production, Little Jumbo, which he co-directed with Takashi Yanase. If you've seen my video on Yanase or those first few Sanrio films, then you know how dark they could get. And Hirata was definitely going to bring that to this Unico adaptation. It was produced in 1978 and screened in 1979 at a Tezuka convention before being released on Laserdisc, VHS, and other physical mediums. However, the physical version of this 29-minute special wasn't released until 1989, a decade after its initial screening. If it had been released in 81 or 82 alongside the other two movies, then it would have been the first official OVA, ousting Oshi's Dallos. Many sources state that the piece was made as a pilot for a TV show, but I couldn't find any verification for this claim. It's clear that Sanrio always had animation in mind for Unico. The hand-painted cell animation in this piece is drop-dead gorgeous, and has a texture that isn't present in Madhouse's two feature-length films. The story starts in media res, showing Unico scour the wastelands alone and afraid. This drab color palette and grim atmosphere is going to carry through the entire short. Dark, dank, polluted cityscapes, dead trees, smog-soaked skies, and never-ending wastelands are all animated as beautifully as they are bleak. This tone carries over in the plot as well. All of Tezuka's comedy is cut from this adaptation. Karapachi's voluptuous wife, the goofy love-struck sentient machine, and even the entire fairy village have all been expunged from the script. Instead, we're given the tale of a young girl dying from an unspecified illness connected to horrible pollution produced by rampant capitalism. There is a moment where the West Wind seemingly has a conversation with the factory.
どいてくださいな。少女の乗った馬があなたの下にいるのです。
どこ者か。俺はここに3年も前から居座っているんだ。俺様がこうやって煙を吐き続けている限り、誰様も溶かせることなんかできないよ。
But it's more so used to drop exposition than it is to characterize said factory. Instead of using fairy magic and communication to solve the problems of the narrative, this iteration of Unico just sort of goes full berserk and destroys the factory in a glorious upbeat montage. It lets the animators showcase Unico's transformation skills and his horn drill. Both see Chico recovering from her illness. She searches for Unico, but he has already been taken away.
ユニコは？ユニコ？ユニコ！どこにいるの？ユニコ！
The film opens and ends with these surreal live-action shots that transition into Unico, alone wandering the never-ending nothingness of his own existence. It's pretty bleak. Hirata was firing on all depression cylinders when it came to this one. He would go on to direct the first feature-length film for Sanrio, and that one is definitely more in line with the tone of the manga. It does a great job of balancing the darker aspects with more lighthearted moments of joy. It's also able to capture the watercolor tones of the fully colored manga in a way that isn't even attempted in this shorter work. Hirata would go on to co-direct the Barefoot Gen films, and if you know anything about depressing anime, then you know how bleak those anti-war pieces get. His Unico short film is a little dark, but I really enjoyed the use of music and mixed mediums to convey the world of Unico. Oh, the music, the music, the music.
空の彼方を見つめるユニコ何を見る時を越えて空の果てまでも
Unico Black Cloud's White Wings has a soundtrack that is on another level than contemporaries. That's extremely hyperbolic since the soundtrack was composed and arranged by Miki Yoshino, Yukihide Takekawa, as well as the rest of the Japanese band Godigo? I'm just going to call them Godigo.
Never reached the end of a long, long journey.
You might recognize them from a little movie from 1977 directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, House.
See in your eyes where tomorrow is hiding in my heart. There's a bell ringing
They had just come off of 2 other Sanrio projects, redoing the music for The Winds of Change and The Glacier Fox, the latter of which would go on to traumatize children the world over.
That never ends, I keep running from my memories.
The Glacier Fox was a documentary about a pair of foxes and their litter as they struggled to survive through bleak winters and surreptitiously sadistic summers. This movie is gut-wrenching to say the least.
Oh, blind Chinita is playing with the dandelions.
There's a moment 30 minutes in involving a blind fox baby named Chinita.
I can almost hear poor Chinita's complaint. Mama, where is everyone gone? I want to go with them. Poor blind Chinita. He hasn't been able to sleep because of the storm. But over the sound of the rain, he seems to hear the breakers from beyond the dunes.
He follows the sound of the ocean.
Look. Oh, Chinita is climbing the hill, as if he is heading for the sound of the breakers. He hesitates, then continues his climb. To me, it's as if he is saying goodbye. The pup sits listening to the breakers, the sound somehow filled with sadness.
Wings lift me high, let me soar through an endless sky, filled with 100,000 dreams. Wind, be my friend, let me guide you and bid you. Today I am truly free.
Poor Chinita. A breaker has washed him out to sea. Farewell, blind pup. You'll be missed.
To meet his premature end. It isn't the only death to happen in the film, but it is the one that made me want to flip my laptop and hug my cats, much to their displeasure. There's a lot of weird ethical questions as to how they got certain shots, but that's something I'll get into if I ever cover Sanrio's live action pictures from this time. What's important in context to this video is the soundtrack. And damn, does it go hard.
Good morning, world, good morning, world, good morning, sunshine goes.
With tracks ranging from jubilant childlike glee to unrelenting sorrow, they somehow manage to cover the gamut with their synthesizers. There's a sense of yearning, searching for hope even though you already know the outcome. The track used for Chinita's final scene really resonates. And if the YouTube comments are anything to go by, just about every kid who saw the movie and heard the song was emotionally impacted by it.
It's so sad, but Chinita was happy. I've always believed that. Chinita is more beautiful than anything else.
When I was a kid, I would cry when listening to this album, but it wasn't because I was sad. Looking back, I was moved to tears. Godiva's music always takes us to a wonderful fantasy world.
Almost every comment on this song is just about sobbing. It therefore makes complete sense that their style works so well with this sad little pony. There are only 3 vocal tracks in the 30-minute special, but each one has a distinct tone which helps elevate the animation. The opening and closing song, Unico's theme, really conveys his unrelenting longing for companionship, as well as the yearning that we, the audience, feel when we see the poor little guy trapped in such a bleak world. Unico. The second song, Flying, has to do some heavy lifting as it scores the scene of Unico showing Chico the sunlight above the clouds. A moment that signifies the hope he inspires in others. It also has to replace the entire tangent of fairy fun that occurs in the manga. The final song, Down, is used as an almost comic relief song as Unico tears down the factory, poisoning the skies and killing Chico. The 2 songs, when paired together, inspire hope and then give us a cheerful climax belying the tragic conclusion we know is coming.
どこ行くんだ、ユニコ。僕、行かなきゃいけないの。さよなら。行くってどこ行くのさ。だって、
This all culminates in a finale and reprise of Unico's theme as he, left alone and afraid, is confronted by an oppressive ocean and an image that directly correlates with the final moments of Chinita, a blind child searching for joy, only to find harsh, unrelenting reality. Part 5 is a quick little chapter where Unico gets to go home for a day. He meets his big sister Corn, who immediately tries to seduce him. It isn't until the parents explain to her that Unico was her little brother that she backs off. Yeah, sometimes Tezuka's humor can be a bit, problematic. Unico's mother is pure white and his father is a bold blue, explaining why he's a very light shade of blue that sometimes appears white or silver. His coloring has literally driven me insane because sometimes he'll just be white in merchandise and other times he'll just be straight up blue, and I'm like, I don't know what color he is supposed to be. The unicorns all live blissfully, gorging themselves on never-ending aphrodisia, which is just a giant hill full of jelly. Unico gets a moment of bliss with his mother, which gets undercut by the melancholy of his curse. Before he has a chance to say goodbye, Unico is yet again swept away into the currents of time. The Tale of the Fangs of Athens is a bit of an anomaly because it was actually the last comic written for Sanrio Lyrica, but Sanrio chose to publish the stories out of order. This order was corrected for the Tezuka Complete Collection reprints done in 2021. This isn't to say the order really matters, since Unico is inherently a cyclical story and you guessed it, will have a dour ending. Fangs of Athens sees Unico meeting the Sphinx, who decides to feed him to her son after Unico refuses to answer any of her riddles. Her son, Piro, is extremely tame for a young sphinx and takes pity on Unico, helping him escape. Unico ends up accidentally circling back to the Mama Sphinx where she lays bleeding out. Her final request is for Unico to help her son become a brave and powerful creature. You can probably figure out where this story's gonna go. They're gonna run into the cast of A Midsummer Night's Dream and proceed to have a wild adventure with Puck and Company. It sort of comes out of nowhere, but is a neat mashup of Greek mythology and Shakespearean Athens. The downside to introducing a cast of fairy folk is that Unico has to take a back seat more than usual. Puck tricks him into ramming a tree where Unico hangs, stuck and helpless for the majority of the story. Pierrot gets caught up in the games of Titania and Oberon, eventually learning his lesson and carrying on his mother's wish. It's a really cute use of classic literature. The dynamics between the vain Titania, the mischievous Puck, and the haughty Oberon are a ton of fun. It's surprisingly upbeat for a story whose main character, Pierrot, is grieving his dead mother. By the end, he's able to grasp the heft of his mother's last wish, but it takes a goofy journey for him to get there, involving silly outfits and even doppelgangers. This is just classic Tezuka, who was known for his balance of tones and emotions. It is a bit of a shame that in Unico's last Sanrio story, he plays a second fiddle to a slew of other previously established characters. Maybe this was the reason Sanrio decided to swap the stories around, but the chapter they'd inevitably choose to close off the series wouldn't provide any more closure. The one-night-only ball sees the introduction of the Russian bandit Marsha.
Everybody loves Moesha. Moesha.
I think it's pronounced Marshka, a teenage orphan who steals to survive. After robbing a baker, Marshka hides out in a sewer, stumbling upon the starving and helpless Unico. Taking pity on the little guy, Marshka gives him her bread and, in one of Tezuka's many fourth wall breaks, uses the speech bubbles of the comic to make a fire. It turns out that Marshka has always dreamed of going to a ball and falling in love, even if only for one night, and Unico makes it happen. He conjures up a dress and carriage and gives her the full Cinderella fantasy. However, there is a catch. She must not speak, for she would give away her identity as a commoner. She has a wonderful time at the ball, and she is courted by the handsome Romanov. But when jewelry starts to go missing, a witch hunt commences that could jeopardize not only Marshka's identity, but her life. One Night Ball is one of the more perplexing Unico stories because it places a heavy emphasis on its political messages. Tezuka puts an emphasis on the severity of Marshka's status. Born into a life of poverty, forced into child labor, and finally pushed into murdering her abuser in order to escape. Tezuka is somehow able to lighten up the tone by putting his slapstick and fourth wall breaks in, but they never undercut the message he's trying to instill about the corrupt hierarchical systems that rob the citizens of their rights in order to benefit the rich. It's something he addresses in his other works about the corrupt patriarchy like Ayako, or even the extremely twisted MW, which he was writing at the same time as Unico. The happy ending of this story only comes because of Unico's status as a deus ex machina, and it is clear to the reader that without him, Marshka would have been executed. It's a hard lesson to teach kids, but Tezuka manages to convey it under the guise of a Cinderella story. It's just another example of how he never wished to talk down to children, and wanted to provide them with stories just as potent as the ones he wrote for adults. Part 8 acts as the finale to the original Unico series. It sees Eros returning to tell Venus of all the beautiful, happy people who have crossed paths with Unico. Venus is furious and summons the West Wind, ordering her to take Unico to the end of time, a wasteland where no life exists. Unico wanders this desolate land until bumping into the demon of solitude, the embodiment of loneliness. Unico tries his hardest to befriend the demon, but he has no interest in friendship unless Unico gives up his horn. Unico agrees to let the demon borrow his horn for one day if they can be friends, but he has to promise to give it back. This goes about as well as you'd expect, and Unico ends up drowning out at sea. However, when the day is over, the demon swims out, returns the horn even though it would cost him his own life. Unico is revived, saves the demon, teaching him the meaning of friendship and love. Aww. But the curse continues, and the West Wind returns to take Unico away again. The demon of solitude feels truly alone for the first time, as he mourns his first and only friend. Thus ends the original manga of Unico. The West Wind states that Venus has taken pity on him, but we can glean that she is probably lying, and she was the one who took pity on Unico after leaving him in such a desolate place. This can also be confirmed by the fact that this wasn't supposed to be the final chapter, as mentioned earlier. This was originally chapter 4 of 8. There were a lot of modifications to this chapter, allowing Eros to mention characters not available until later chapters in the opening conversation with Venus. This is really all just nitpicking, and none of it actually matters since Unico acts as a thematic piece of storytelling rather than one that focuses on chronological serialized formatting. As a piece of symbolic literature, this is actually a wonderful conclusion for the series, as it sees Unico reach the very ends of time and space, meeting the very embodiment of loneliness. He is not only able to befriend solitude itself, but bring it joy, even if only for a moment. It's a beautiful ode to the fleeting experience of happiness and the Sisyphean cycles of sorrow and joy. Even at the ends of the earth, Unico will find a way to spread love. While Sanrio's Lyrica magazine ended the story in 1979, it was not the end for Unico in either manga or film. Sanrio dissolved their magazine, returning all rights to the respective artists. A move that seems wild from today's perspective, where companies will create literal garbage to retain character rights. Tezuka repurposed the Unico character in 1980 in Shokaku Ichinensei magazine for little boys and girls. That's right, Unico's next destination was then modern Japan. Not only that, he was about to make a leap larger than between magazines. He was going to become a movie star. While the first animated Unico short, Black Cloud, White Wings, was animated in-house at Sanrio Productions, the company decided to outsource the animation to Madhouse for Unico's feature-length outing. Toshio Hirata, director of the short film, would return to direct this feature-length film, while Masaki Tsuji would write the script, adapting Unico in Solitude and The Cat on the Broomstick. Sanrio outsourced the film in the hopes of matching the quality of Disney work, no longer animating the picture at 12 frames per second, but at Disney's standard 24. This would see a fairly large spike in the quality of the animation, but also double the animation work, hence the outsourcing. The film began full production in 1979, around the same time the manga was finishing up in Lyrica. It had a 2-year production period and released March 14, 1981. On July 8, 1986, the movie was aired on the Disney Channel, introducing the character and Tezuka to a whole generation of kids.
There once was a unicorn with a very special horn. It could make wishes come true.
It's the horn! My very own horn!
Or take them away.
What have you done?
But could it save them from an evil prince?
There's something rotten about that guy.
The Fantastic Adventures of Unico.
The film and its sequel would see frequent re-airings until 1990, meaning Unico was pretty prominent on American cable screens for half a decade. But how is the first feature film, and does it do justice to its source material?
The little fellow named Unico, as cute can be. An innocent boy was Unico, so happy and so carefree.
The film opens with a sickly sweet number introducing Unico.
We love you, oh Unico.
Psyche and Venus have been removed from the plot entirely, and instead we get a bunch of pompous old gods who get upset that Unico is bringing joy to everyone, something only gods should be able to do. They command the West Wind to take Unico to the Hill of Oblivion.
You must find the creature Unico and carry him far away and cast him up on the Hill of Oblivion.
But she, of course, takes pity on Unico and instead drops him off on the island of Solitude.
Poor little one. I must steal you from your mother and take you to a place where you'll be forgotten forever.
Not much of an upgrade. We are introduced to the young demon who has been renamed Beezle in the American dub.
I'm Beezle, the devil of solitude, and devils of solitude are supposed to be alone, naturally.
Unico gives Beezle his horn in the hopes that they'll become friends. Unico nearly drowns, and Beezle learns about friendship and helping others.
What is it? What's wrong? Unico, the sea is poison to devils.
It initially seems like a strange chapter to open your story with, but it actually does a pretty excellent job of setting up the despair Unico feels after being separated from his family.
Lonely all my life, I've been alone for all my life.
It's a dark and gutsy way to open your film, but immediately establishes the melancholic tone that is pervasive throughout most Unico works. The West Wind scoops him up, takes him off to another land, leaving Beezle behind, just like the comics.
And just when I decided to be your friend, too!
This is where we get our next major change, though. Unico doesn't lose his memories between these two stories. He retains knowledge of Beezle and his current situation.
My ribbon's red, my whiskers long, my paws as white as snow.
Unico finds himself in a flower field and eventually hears a cat singing in the distance. This is Chow, or Katie, if you're watching the dub. She was abandoned by her owners and is now in search of a witch with the hopes of becoming one herself.
It's true. I was abandoned.
Here we get an insanely cute musical number by Chow as she belts her I Want song to Unico.
A magical broom and a magical hat. I'm Katie the kitty witch. So if you ever need a magical cat, Katie's the kitty to call.
It's a wonderfully upbeat moment to pull us out of the dour opening.
I really thought that they loved me.
Chow and Unico meet an elderly woman that Chow believes is a witch.
Yow! See what I told you? It's a witch and she's come back just like I knew she would.
You know, I think you've read too many fairy tales.
The woman shares her home and food with the two, but is clearly lonely and living in destitution.
Get lots of rest, old woman, so you can teach me your magic.
No, thank you. I've had plenty.
Unico uses his powers to transform Chow into a young woman in order to help their host.
What on earth are you doing here, young lady?
Here, I think it's only right that I give you a hand around here while you're teaching me your magic.
Uh-huh.
Everything is going well until Chow becomes ungrateful and lazy, losing access to Unico's magic and therefore going back to being a cat.
That I'd like to see. Meow! What have you done? How dare you do this to me? You'd better turn me back into a girl right now!
I can only do it when I like the person that I'm with.
I know all my cats are ungrateful and lazy, that's for sure. Unico's magic will only allow her to be human if she's acting out of love or kindness for others. This is shown when the old lady falls into a river and Chow leaps in to save her.
No, I'll save you!
Chao gets to keep her human form for a while, meeting the mysterious Baron Ghost. He invites her to his manor to perform for him. While not as explicit as the manga, it is shown that the animals of the forest fear Baron Ghost, who, instead of being a hunter like in the manga, might be a demon? A vampire? Something spooky. Chao lies to Unico, sneaks out to the Baron's manor, and gets struck by the Baron, who gives her some sketchy wine.
Drink, Katie. Drink as much as you like.
Meanwhile, the West Wind is trying to bring Beazle to help Unico, only to be harassed by her fabulous sister, the Night Wind. It's clear that the writer wanted to connect the anthology stories in some way, and does so by bringing the little demon in to aid Unico. Unico and Chao make their escape with the help of Beazle. In the manga, this is where Unico turns the animals of the forest into humans to overthrow the horrible Baron who has been abusing his subjects. Classic Tezuka political subtext. The movie does away with this, instead having the Baron and Unico battle it out until... Okay, well that's pretty dark.
Don't mind me, lady. I'm just a friend of his.
Oh, well I guess he's just a kaiju now. Unico goes Super Saiyan and defeats the giant monster. Before they can celebrate, the West Wind whisks him off again.
Katie, Beazle, goodbye.
Chao is now permanently human and Beazle is no longer alone. Granny even gets some final wise words before the credits roll.
A white horse with wings? Then he was a unicorn, without a doubt.
Huh? The movie is about as faithful an adaptation as Black Cloud's White Feathers, both taking liberties in order to suit the medium. This one became a hybrid of two stories so that it could fit the typical 3-act script structure to streamline the works for cinema. As a movie, it's pretty good. The animation is beautiful, the musical numbers are wonderful, and there's even some action in the third act. While I would have preferred Unico uniting the animals of the forest to stop the Baron, turning him into a giant Chernobyl monster is fine. The newest adaptation, Unico Awakening, would go both routes. It's an exciting climax, even giving Beazle the chance to show his character growth, showing how Unico has truly helped his two friends.
And I don't need this stupid horn. Look, I'll give it back to you. Please open your eyes.
I can see why this movie resonated with so many kids in the 80s. It isn't afraid to have a darker tone, while it also follows a fairly simple narrative structure. Ends on the classic melancholy note, reminding audiences that Unico will never escape his curse. It shares a wonderful message that no matter how short the time we spend with someone, the smallest acts of kindness can have a massive influence on the lives of others. While Unico will forget his interactions with Beazle and Chao, they will never forget Unico or how he impacted their lives. While life can be terribly lonely at times, there's always hope as long as we approach others with kindness. Just don't drink the sketchy, clearly drugged wine. Unico Shokaku Ichinensei, or Unico First Grade, was a series of 6 to 8 page comics that ran in a children's magazine between 1980 and 1984 for a total of 43 comics. The comic was about a modern Japanese kid named Esuo who longed for a companion, constantly bringing home stray animals and at one point, a stray grandmother. Eventually he stumbles across a collapsed Unico sleeping in a park. Esuo takes Unico home, providing him with love and care, which allows Unico to grant Esuo's wish of friendship and adventure. The next 42 comics see Esuo and Unico going on wacky adventures as the first grader makes a slew of wishes, from a baby dragon named Ragon to meeting Santa Claus. Ragon actually becomes a recurring character and almost a second mascot character for the series. Unico uses his wishes to help Esuo, but also get him into even more trouble that they then have to get out of together. learning a lesson along the way. If this sounds familiar, it's because this format is almost beat for beat the same as Doraemon, who uses his gadgets instead of wishes. That isn't to say that this work is entirely derivative, but it's clear that Tezuka took a format he knew would work for younger audiences and used it to write his short-form comic stories. These weren't the fantastical romances of Sanrio Lyrica. They were streamlined, comical stories that you could find in any children's magazine. This was seemingly intentional, as the comics were a means to keeping Unico fresh in the minds of young audiences as the 1981 and 1983 movies came out. Unico First Grade therefore acted more as an advertisement for the character than any meaningful progression of his narrative or concept. I say this not to dismiss Unico First Grade, but to emphasize how absolutely insane Tezuka could get with the stories with seemingly no repercussions. Trees blooming noses, serial killing food spirits, hundreds of living cartoon imitations of Unico and Ragon, Unico getting eaten and digested, whatever the hell this tiger shark car tree with human feet is, this comic does anything and everything. At one point, Unico battles a sentient car with 6 eyes and giant lips because it ran over a Jesus statue. There's a comic where Esuo wishes for countless snow people to come to life. Then he gets overwhelmed because there are just so many of them, and he ends up tricking the snow people into offing themselves by drinking hot tea. Lots of other characters from Tezuka's other works make cameo appearances, from Phoenix to Tezuka himself. The comic literally ends with Esuo being gifted a little sibling from Santa Claus. The baby pees in Esuo's face and then proceeds to release a geyser of piss, causing Esuo and Unico to chase down Santa, all while carrying the spraying baby. They try to contain the urine by wrapping a bag around his bottom side, but it ends up exploding mid-air as they confront Santa, raining piss down everywhere. It's all a dream, of course, and Esuo states that he doesn't need anyone because he has Unico. It's an insanely bizarre way to end an equally bizarre gag comic. Tezuka could literally write anything he wanted at this point, and they would publish it. Unico First Grade seems like it was just a way for him to blow off steam while also working on some of the heavier works that he was writing simultaneously. But he was also helping to pen the story for an upcoming second Sanrio Films Unico feature, a movie that would see Unico return to the dark, melancholy tone of his Lyrica days, while also giving Unico his swan song. Unico and the Island of Magic was the second feature-length Unico film from Sanrio and the first piece to have direct involvement of creator Osamu Tezuka. He penned an original synopsis of the plot for the tentatively titled Unico and the Kingdom of the Sun in September 1980. But upon turning in a 43-page outline, the director Moribi Murano told him that they wouldn't be able to cover the complex plot in one movie. Murano was previously an animator working at Tezuka's studio, working on Astro Boy and the 1001 Nights adaptation. Before Unico, his big accomplishment was actually in comics, with the hit Bark Boon Boon, which was also adapted into a semi-lost anime. But after Unico, he would go on to primarily focus on his manga, only returning to animation for character design on works like Dagger of Kamui. The script for Unico 2 went back and forth until Tezuka was pleased with the final product, which is, I guess it's fine. It's objectively the most gorgeous of the animated Unico pieces, but there's something lacking plot-wise that causes the movie to drag, and that can't be fully explored without a bit of synopsis.
Hey! Stop it! Let me go! Oh, this is serious business, you!
The film opens with a little recap before Unico gets dropped in a forest,
Where am I?
meets a mobster cat with his wooden headphones,
I am Melvin Magnificat, and this is my forest. Thought you could pull a fast one on me, did ya?
cries in the rain, and eventually runs into a bad boy. Whistle master and apprentice magician Toby. He's an enemy to the forest animals, turning them into clay dolls at the whim of his master, Kukuruku. Get used to hearing that because I'm going to have to say Kukuruku a lot. Kukuruku is literally what nightmares are made of.
You'll do that for me, won't you? Toby.
Between Kukuruku and the Red Wizard Omadon from Flight of Dragons, the early 80s really had a monopoly on traumatizing red magicians. It isn't until the 20-minute mark that we actually get our protagonist, Cherry.
He's probably frightened of people.
Well, I'll take care of that.
She saved Unico and is here to be the actual lead of the movie. One of the biggest issues Sanrio had with the first draft of the Unico script was that Unico was just a side character, to which Tezuka responded,
Unico is fine with that. There can always be another leading role, and Unico can be a supporting role.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Unico doesn't work as a protagonist. He doesn't have much character or internal conflict, and is mostly just there to help facilitate the plot and look cute as a button. That's why Unico is almost always placed with a young girl in peril so that he can help her through her conflict. It turns out that Cherry is Toby's little sister. He ran away from home to become an apprentice to the chaotic evil that is Kukuruku. In the original draft, Toby transforms his parents into clay dolls before running off, but Sanrio must have thought that was too dark, so they have Kukuruku show up and do it. Oh, and he goes on to transform the entire town as well. Toby and Unico protect Cherry, so she's the only survivor. Cherry then sets out to find Kukuruku's castle to convince Kukuruku to turn everyone back and let her brother go.
Hurry, Unico, hurry! I'm coming!
There's a chase scene with a toy dragon, and Cherry's plan goes about as well as you'd expect.
Lord Kuruku, you've got to return my mother and my father!
There's no point talking sense to this psychotic clown. Cherry is momentarily turned into a toy and dances in some of Madhouse's most insane animation. Toby helps her escape the castle, and then she goes on a quest to the end of the earth to find out why Kukuruku is such an asshole. The movie sees Cherry reach her goal, find out that Kukuruku's weakness is love, go back to the castle, repeat all the scenes from the first time they were at the castle, get turned into a doll, and allow Unico to become the main character for one final scene where being nice to Kukuruku is enough to make him stop. If that last part didn't sound entertaining, it's because it's not.
What do you mean you feel sorry for me?
It feels very repetitive. I'm not sure if Tezuka's original concept would have made a better movie. According to his notes in one of the Tezuka design works, Cherry would have gone to the Kingdom of the Sun, met with the Queen, and found out that Kukuruku was a disowned prince who left the city after a falling out, resulting in him making an army of dolls to destroy the city he once loved. Cherry then has to disguise herself as the Queen and lead an army into battle against the wizard. They would not have gone back to the castle, but instead expanded the world and character motivations. Instead, the human and animal clay dolls are used to build Kukuruku's castle, emphasizing on how he's building a kingdom on top of the bodies of the many.
It's the greatest magic castle in the world, and it's mine!
It's a cool, dark idea that definitely has the Tezuka bite to it, but results in a movie that's poorly paced and forced to retread plot points.
Sherry, what is she doing here?
The finale also undercuts the idea that Cherry is the protagonist, removing her from the equation and placing all the focus on Unico, something that Tezuka never wanted with his Unico stories. Usually the characters that Unico helped would go through some kind of trial and overcome it, or end up learning a lesson by the end of the story. Cherry just sort of gets turned into a doll and then comes back. Neither Toby nor Cherry really get fulfilling character arcs because Sanrio wished to focus on Unico in the final moments.
If you had a friend, you'd know that not everyone's like that.
Please stop it.
Having him defeat Kukuruku with the power of love. It feels very much like they didn't know how to resolve the abridged version of the concept, so instead of doing multiple movies or a TV show, they just chose to end the story halfway through. Murano was interviewed about adapting the work in the April 1983 issue of Tezuka magazine, stating,
Unico is a very interesting and deep work, both in terms of its characters and its world. In particular, what forms the backbone of the story is something of a mentality, a matter of the mind and heart. The unicorn, which can exert its power only through being loved, is suggestive in itself. I confess that I was overloaded as a first-time director to visualize the mysterious love, hate, prestige, etc. of the original work. Tezuka Sensei's work is multifaceted, and inadvertent visualization reveals the ineffectiveness of the director.
Murano openly admits that the tone of Tezuka's official work was the hardest part to adapt, and this shows in the final product, despite the film leaning more toward mature themes than the first film did. It's disappointing because the film is stunning to look at, and you can feel the staff at Madhouse really showing off their technical prowess. This emphasis on visuals above all else makes even more sense when you realize how Murano actually proposed the film. In the same interview for Tezuka magazine, Murano admits to creating storyboards for entire scenes before any kind of script was written.
I was allowed to make the film in a very selfish way. In recent years, animated film productions, even in theaters, have been made from a script, but I was allowed to draw a storyboard. We set the location according to the story. Before the script was ever finished, I had drawn about 200 boards.
This emphasis on the visuals over any form of narrative is especially apparent in the second half of the film, where Cherry jumps between locations with no rhyme or reason, only to end up back at the castle. The Forest of the Demons, the desert, and the End of the Earth were all in Murano's initial storyboards, but not present in any of Tezuka's story pitches. Somewhere along the way, the director seems to have opted to prioritize his storyboards over telling a compelling narrative. All three of these locations are stunning in their own right, but leaves the audience wondering what could have been if Murano and Tezuka had worked together to create a more cohesive narrative. While this would be the second to last Sanrio film, it wouldn't be the last time Madhouse got to work on a Tezuka piece. 2 decades later, they would make a splash with Rintaro leading an adaptation of Metropolis. Unico's film outings proved to be fruitful enough for Sanrio to make him a part of their mascot headliners until 1989, when Osamu Tezuka passed away. With his death, the rights to Unico went in full back to Tezuka Productions, and all merchandise was to be produced through their company and no longer through Sanrio. This would lead to Unico's darkest period, 2 decades of little to no Unico content, be it animation or merchandise. There were just too many characters in Tezuka's elaborate star system of franchise opportunities, and Unico was never meant to be a star. He was meant as a vehicle to tell other more complex stories of heartbreak, suffering, pollution, and even genocide. Something few besides Tezuka could juggle alongside the cutest mascot character this side of Pum Pum Puddin'. Unico's appearances after Tezuka's death were few and far between. Every few years, a piece of merchandise might pop up, or you might get a collaboration, but besides that, there wasn't much for Unico fans. Then, at the turn of the millennium, Tezuka Productions began a retrospective on the great mangaka, with new animated short films to be shown at the Osamu Tezuka World, a miniature exhibit and theater located in Kyoto Station that would last until 2011. Kyoto is also the location of the world's largest manga museum, which has a gorgeous Phoenix statue hanging in a preserved traditional schoolhouse. Phoenix would be the narrator of these short films, and the 4th film would feature Unico, titled Please Save Our Fragile Earth. Yep, it's an environmental story about a tree boy named Tsubasa who goes on a quest with Unico to restore Earth, which was flooded after humans destroyed the ozone layer, melting the polar ice caps, and just all around causing a bad time. It's a cute romp through Tezuka's characters with cameos from the Sphinx, Astro Boy, and a giant demon that is literally the manifestation of human greed. It's a cute little romp that doesn't really build on any of the characters, but uses them to convey an important environmental message to kids. Unico also made an appearance in the 2005 short film Dr. Pinoco's Forest Adventure. It was shown before the film Blackjack, the Two Doctors of Darkness, following the cute Pinoco-chan and her dog Largo as they get lost in the woods while trying to deliver Blackjack's medical bag. Along the way, who do they meet? It's Unico, this time voiced by Tezuka's daughter, Rumiko Tezuka. It's about what you'd expect from an introductory short film, a light little romp to prepare audiences for the main course that was Blackjack. That pretty much sums up what Tezuka Productions thought of Unico during this period. He was more a mascot character to stick on merchandise or have pop up as a cameo rather than a character that could carry a new comic or show. That's understandable because the Unico dynamic has always been a strange one, with the emphasis always placed on other characters acting as the protagonist, while Unico takes on a supporting role. Both short films follow this formula, as Tsubasa and Pinocchio are the leads, and Unico is just there to provide the magic and to make their dreams reality. After these works, however, Unico would go into another long slumber. But the world of the late 2010s was drastically different than that of 1976, when Unico was first conceived, and the American dream that brought him to life may finally come to fruition. In 2019, a comic writer and overall Tezuka fan, Samuel Staton, got a rare opportunity. Tezuka Productions was looking for ways to expand their brand and utilize the vast array of characters in Tezuka's library and make them relevant again. One of the pitches they received was from the American Staton for a modern adaptation of the cult favorite Unico. Tezuka Productions latched onto this idea but wanted to make sure Staton respected the characters and message of the original text. Negotiations went back and forth for a year, and they were still unsure if there was any audience for the little guy. This led to the cesspit where all overly ambitious passion projects go: Kickstarter. The Kickstarter for Unico Awakening launched May 2nd, 2022, and it grossed $50,000 within 24 hours. It actually had a reasonable goal of publishing one book, and any stretch goals would just be for fan art from a menagerie of artists. The Kickstarter went on to raise $179,000 overall and quickly got picked up by Scholastic for an official release. It was happening. Unico was coming back in 2024. But what was Awakening going to be? Staton had pitched it as a retelling of classic Unico stories, but with more connected narratives, expanding the roles of the West Wind and Venus, fully fleshing out Unico's world and maybe even providing kids with the resolution the original story never provided. So here we are, years later, and not only do we have Unico Awakening, but we also have its follow-up, Unico Hunted, and they're fine. Unico Awakening is a pretty direct adaptation of Cat on a Broomstick, updating Chow to be Chloe, and depositing Unico in a modern town instead of whatever fairy tale time period the first was supposed to be set during. The major changes come in the framing narrative. Venus is changed to an imposing conqueror who utilizes flower-themed space tech to dominate the galaxy. Yeah, it's a pretty big shift from the fickle Greek goddess of the original. Staton wants Venus to be an overarching villain, a big bad for Unico to defeat. The West Wind would carry Unico between worlds, but would also quickly set out on her own journey to save Unico from Venus's wrath. Nightwind is around too, but she's about as important as she was in the original. There's a major emphasis on action in both Unico Awakening and Hunted. Staton loves climactic battles, the first of which involves the Baron turning into a giant kaiju-esque monster that is defeated by Unico's magic horn. I like this about as much as I did when the movie did the exact same thing. It makes sense from a storytelling perspective, but doesn't really mesh well with the melancholy reflective tone of the original stories. The action scenes from the original were usually to set up a slapstick punchline, humor being a big part in almost every Tezuka work, to the point where he had a gourd character named Hyotan Suji that would show up as a recurring joke when the comic was getting too serious. So how is the humor in Staten's Unico? Well, there isn't any. It's all very direct fantasy action. I can see this appealing to kids who want a story that feels like it has stakes, but placing all the emphasis on the narrative, which is, as stated earlier, a facsimile of the previous work, but now expanded from a 40-page comic to a full 200-page graphic novel. But it still has my favorite element of Unico, the unrelenting melancholy and heavy themes, right? Well, yeah, the first book has Chloe the cat being discarded by her owner's wife, the Baron terrorizing the inhabitants of the forest, and Unico's eventual memory erasure. But the emphasis at the end isn't on how this is an inevitable foregone conclusion. Instead, it is something that can be changed. The West Wind has a plan, and it's gonna have massive repercussions. The second book, Hunted, was going to get weird. Unico Hunted is the latest entry in the Unico reboot series, and is adapted from the chapter Black Clouds, White Wings. This entry really shows the direction that Staten seemed to want to take Unico, and that seems to be aligning itself with many other successful serialized kids' stories. Hunted continues to establish its overarching narrative as Venus sends a new character, a Gantu-esque bounty hunter, to chase Unico across space and time. This iteration of Unico follows the same story beats of the original manga, but cuts the creepy robot that held Chico captive, replacing him with a more maternal, overprotective artificial intelligence. This never lessens the severity of the situation, but aligns the themes with more modern sensibilities. The fairy folk from the original work have been adapted as butt-kicking fae folk who live under the city. I'm sure Tezuka would have loved this iteration of the Fae. He often included anthropomorphic characters into his works, and it's clear he was a fan. This book doubles down on the action and begins to do away with the trappings of the original text. It's clear Staten doesn't want to be tied down to the cyclical structure. He wants to give Unico the full Chosen One fantasy, allowing him to break the chains restraining him to secondary character. This isn't Lyrica Unico. It isn't first grade Unico. It also isn't Unico from any of the films. It's a new Unico for a new audience with modern aesthetics and ideas. After 50 years, Unico proves that he still has surprises in store for those willing to give him a chance. It's another reminder of Unico's original message, the impermanence of the now, and how change will take hold no matter how hard we try to resist. Tezuka used Unico to symbolize pivotal moments in the lives of various characters, from young princesses to lonely demons. In these moments, Unico appeared to help them through their struggles and discover something new about themselves. He similarly used Unico to aid Esuo in Unico First Grade, helping the lonely child through strife and solitude. With Unico Hunted, the character finally gets to take the spotlight and become more than just an idea. He becomes an active participant in his own narrative. This Unico has evolved and changed, but that does not diminish the stories that have come before. It will only enhance his tale as he brings a new audience, a new generation of readers to his magical stories. It definitely isn't perfect though. There's something inherently lost in this and almost all adaptations of Unico. So what makes a Unico work successful, and why haven't any of these adaptations been able to fully capture the essence of Tezuka's original manga? So I originally had a section of this video devoted to Bambi and its massive influence on Tezuka. I ended up researching and writing another essay's worth of material on that subject alone. Maybe I'll record it and put it on as like a Patreon video, but I don't think it's 100% necessary for this subject. To put it briefly, the naturalism of Disney's Bambi would inspire Tezuka's Jungle Emperor Leo, as well as every other piece of media he worked on.
Bambi I watched over 80 times. Once I'd memorized all the scenes, I looked at other people in the audience. Seeing them laugh and cry made me happy as if they were my own audience.
The same year, he would publish an adaptation of Bambi for Manga Shonen. He was a little obsessed. Tezuka became fascinated with the way the animated picture evoked feelings from the audience by juxtaposing realism with fantasy. This juxtaposition would go on to be the core of each of his works, especially Unico. However, while it was possible for him to cover these themes in his manga, usually with a tragic ending, studio executives did not want these themes in their movies. They wanted the kids walking out of the theater brimming with joy, not sobbing because brave Dan the titular tiger died in the final moments. The first two Unico animations were able to find a happy medium for the adaptation. The same cannot be said for the others. Maribi Murano, director of Unico and the Island of Magic, summed it up well when he stated Tezuka's original comic had a mysterious love-hate prestige. Tezuka Sensei's work is multifaceted. He described it as having a mentality, a balance of mind and heart. This phrase was fairly complex to translate. I believe it has to do with the balance of sentimentality and logic that the stories must precariously maintain. In Bambi, this can be seen as a balance between reality and fantasy, harsh contrast to embellish both elements. It is a through line in many of Tezuka's works for children, and one even more apparent here. Unico is inherently a story about change, the impermanence of childhood, joy, and life itself. It presents the concepts of death and isolation to children in a manner both delicate and frank. A similar tone can be seen in the story of Chinita, the blind pup from the Glacier Fox. His story and ending were tragic, but his existence was beautiful. Just like Unico, his time with others was fleeting, but he still got to experience the warmth of his mother and siblings as they slept in their den, the fresh smell of flowers blooming at the height of spring, and the pounding, never-ceasing sounds of the breakers out at sea. Unico, Bambi, and Chinita show that life is worth living no matter the ending. It's a story that is imperative to teach children, a story that at first seems horrific, a slap in the face of reality in the middle of your fantasy. But as we age, the pain dulls, and we grow to find a comfort in the knowledge of shared experiences. It's a tone and feeling that is rare to find in modern media, especially children's media. It was present in Bambi. Hints of it can be seen in modern works like The Wild Robot, but it is also present in almost all of these Sanrio productions, reinforcing why their collaboration with Tezuka was so impactful. It also explains why adaptations have so much trouble conveying the appeal of the original comic. Besides the anthology structure, the works were dense with themes and ideas that are hard to explain in a video essay, let alone a movie or comic that has a unicorn fight a kaiju. There will probably never be another Tezuka, another Unico, another Bambi, or another Chinita, but we can continue to create art, spread love, and live our lives to the fullest.
You have everything here, don't you, Mother?
Yes. There is one thing we don't have, and that is sorrow.
You're always happy, but isn't it because of sorrow that you can be happy?
That's true. We did experience sorrow just once. And that was when you, our treasure, went away.
This scene from Hometown Visit encapsulates the themes and ideas that Tezuka wanted to convey to his audience, primarily an audience of children. Happiness is fleeting and can only exist because we also experience suffering. Unico embodies the paradoxical balance of joy and sorrow. His existence is a Sisyphean cycle of loneliness and fear, finding love and then losing it, never even getting the catharsis of grief. In these stories, characters are able to feel joy because of Unico, because of sorrow. Unico conveys the cycle of life in a way children may not be able to articulate, but can viscerally understand. We resonate with Unico because we too have experienced fleeting happiness and what feels like never-ending sadness. Unico teaches us that there will always be sorrow and misery in our futures, but there will also be joy, friendship, and love. We, like Unico, Just have to keep moving forward and hope of a brighter tomorrow. Unico nuzzled up against his mother's warm body and nodded off into his one night of happy slumber. The primary source for this video was myunicofans.com, a comprehensive collection of information about all things Unico. There was still a lot of behind-the-scenes information that I didn't include in this video, so if you're still hungry for more Unico content, their site is going to be the best place to start. Was this your first time hearing about Unico, or are you a longtime fan? Did you read the new comics? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject so we can keep this Unico discourse going. I really want to hear from all those Unico kids who saw it on the Disney Channel. This video's been a really long one, as Unico is one of the works that initially got me interested in Sanrio films. If you're interested in their other works, then check out my other videos on Takashi Yanase's works, Sea Prince and the Fire Child, or subscribe to my Patreon for an exclusive video on The Mouse and His Child. That being said, I'd like to thank my patrons Blake Partridge, Cinema Zen, and Reina. If you'd like updates on future Sanrio film video essays, then check out my Patreon at patreon.com/obliviousben. I've got a few more movies to cover, and I usually post scripts and release videos early over there. I'd also like to thank Moe Chicken for the avatar art. I ended up importing quite a lot of Unico merch and magazines for this video, and I don't know how much of it is archived online. I ended up with 5 issues of Sanrio Lyrica, each of which is an amazing microcosm of late 70s Japan. The future and past of Unico are looking pretty bright, and I hope his new books bring many new readers into the world of Tezuka and Sanrio. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.
What's the big idea? Thought you could pull a fast one on me, did ya?